welcome. Thanks so much for joining me in my home studio here at Sheer Soul Sound, and welcome to our very first episode of Breaking Down the Mix. We're really excited you could join us because today we're going to be sharing something really different, unlike anything we've ever done before. As you heard behind me, I have the session open for our recent release for Hanukkah of a Stevie Wonder Hanukkah. Many of you have probably seen it. If you haven't, definitely check it out on YouTube and subscribe to this channel for more releases just like it. But today, we're going to be showing you how a song like that is actually put together here in the studio. So without any further ado, let's just dive right in and check it out. Okay, here we are in front of the mix, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and show you the tracks that we have. On top, you could see I have Stevie Wonder's original tracks. Those are just for reference. Every once in a while, if I'm listening, you could hear that he's a half step up in E flat, we're in D minor, but that's just really good reference. Then we have our vocal tracks next, followed by our instrument tracks, saxophone, guitar, keyboards, we have bass, and then at the bottom drums. Now for me personally, some people mix in a different way. Other people put the drums at the top and put the vocals at the bottom. I know a lot of people do that. Hang on, let me take a drink of a little water here. L'chaim. There we go. So some people I know mix with the drums at the top and other people with the vocals at the bottom. This is just the way it works well for me. I always build my band from the bottom up. So I'm actually going to start showing you this mix from the bottom up as well. So let's listen to the drums first. All right, cool. They sound really good. Now, actually, the best way, in my best advice that I can give you, is if you want to get a really good drum sound, I would start with a really good room and really good microphones and obviously a very good drummer. So in this case, we had Nadav Sneer playing drums. He's an incredible drummer. You could check him out on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. But Nadav brought his amazing sounding DW drum kit to actually my parents' basement. We decided to record this in my parents' basement because Nadav lives in Westchester and it was really convenient for him. So we set it up in my parents' basement and it actually sounded incredibly good. I set up 12 mics for this set. And you could see here we have 2 overheads. We have a hi-hat mic. We have 3 tom mics. Snare, I did top and bottom. Kick, I did in and out. And then I did a pair of room mics. Now those room mics, I could show you those in a minute, but the room mics actually ended up functioning a little bit differently than I intended, but it still worked out really, really well. So I'm going to solo some of these mics just to give you an idea of kind of what we're doing here. So first mic is the kick mic. Now that mic on its own doesn't sound great, but when you combine it with the kick out, that's what I'm talking about. So I was really happy with the sound of this kick drum. And I'm crazy about kick drums. So for me, the kick is really the heart and soul of the song. Usually when I mix a song, I may actually mix the whole thing and then at the end bring the kick up just to get some sound, pumping in the bottom. I was really happy with this, but what's missing from this bottom end kick drum is that little ting of the beater on top, and that's what that kick in does. So if I solo that, now again, if you listen, I would say this mic on its own really does not sound very good. But when you combine them, and I was actually really happy with that. So if you look in our mix window and you look at our kick drums, look above them at the inserts, you see that on my kick in, I have nothing. On my kick out, I have some EQ. Actually, this is some fairly aggressive EQ. What do I have here? 14 decibels at 58 hertz. I guess that's the bottom sound of the kick. And then I also had another 6 decibels at 1.8K, and that's on a shelf. So if you listen to the kick out before that, just with this EQ muted, and then the EQ on, a lot rounder, a lot fuller, a lot richer, and then when combined with the other kick, you get a really good sound. So there's our kick drum. Next up, we have the snare drum. Now the snare as well has 2 microphones on it. I have a top snare and a bottom snare. So if you listen here, that's your top snare drum. Now to me this sounds like a nice drum, but this sounds almost more like a tom. You don't really hear the snares. But then when you listen to the bottom soloed, there you hear the snares rattling on the bottom of the drum, and for me that's really the characteristic sound of the snare. You blend those two together, yeah, and a really, really nice snare sound. Again, you could see above in the inserts here, I really didn't do a lot of EQ and compression because I spent a lot of time getting the right snare drum sound. I made sure Nadav tuned his snare drum the way I wanted, and I made sure that I placed the microphone the way I wanted and got really the sound that I like. Here on the EQ, this was a little more gentle. A little cut here at 290 hertz and a little bit of a boost here at 2K. Pretty simple. All right. Now you add a little reverb to that. You see it's sending out to bus 1 and 2. I have my reverb here, just using a simple stock Deverb that many of you have in Pro Tools. I'm using my Deverb on bus 1 and 2. And I'm just sending all these instruments out to the bus. So without the reverb, it sounds like this. You add the reverb. Hold on 1 second. Add that reverb. Yeah, it really adds a lot of character to it. Now take the kicks that we just showed you and the snares together. I just have those 4 channels soloed. Good, and this is the way I build out my mix. I'm actually deconstructing it in the same way that I constructed it. I usually start with that kick snare fill, and I want to get something that's really punchy and really groovy. The next thing I do is add the full sound of the kit before I add any toms. So I'm going to look at the overheads next. Here are the drum overheads. I have a left and a right. If you listen to each one, and then the right, together. Now those sound pretty good. Actually, you could see again, I didn't do much here. I chose the right mics. I used Rode pencil microphones, small diaphragm condenser on those, and I got a really, really good sound out of the box. Those, I noticed that the kick drum is not as heavy in those, but it doesn't need to be because I have the kick drum in the other mics. For those, what I want is a good overall sound of the drum kit. A nice roomy sound, a nice full, rich sound, and I think we got it here. Here you can really hear the cymbals as well. Okay, so the next step is I take my kick drum, the 2 kick drums, I take my 2 snare drums, and then I add in, this is before the overheads, and then add in the overheads. You see, it really brings the whole thing to life. So after that, I'm going to look very quickly at our room mics. So let's take a look. We got 2 room mics. They were intended to be a stereo pair, but I ended up using them in a slightly different way. Always be ready to change your plan. Don't be stuck in anything and feel like this is what I plan to do, so this is what I have to do. You should always be willing to consider another option. So in this case, I had 2 room mics. This gave it a nice sound, and then I heard this one. Now to me, these 2 things not only have a different sound, but they have a different character completely. One of them feels like a close-up, warm, rich impression of the kit. The other one feels much further away. So rather than using them as a left and right and panning them 100 and 100 hard left and right, I use these as close and far, and I pan them both in the middle. So it gave the whole thing with the kick and the snare much more urgency. So if you listen to them together, now on their own, that may not sound very good, but let's show how it builds up again. Here's the kicks. Add in the snares. There's our overheads. And the room mics. See how we started with a kick snare sound that was really kind of almost mechanical or computerized, and now we've come to a drum sound that really sounds like a drum set in a room, and it happened to be a really good room, which we were happy about. So let's listen to these room mics one more time. I thought I could make it even better by adding some reverb. So I did. And then let's add that into our kick, our snares, and our overheads. Awesome. All right, these drums are really sounding good. Now the remaining 4 mics are really relatively simple. I have a hi-hat mic. I'll play you that on its own. This really focuses on the hi-hat. And then I have the individual tom mics, which you can't hear here. You'd have to hear them where there's a tom fill, like here. Yeah, something like that. So those sound really good. For me, that's all about getting them at the right level. You see these are all these mics are at different levels here on the mixer, and they're all panned differently. So I want the way the drum set looks in the video, I want you to be able to hear the drums in that same way. And it's about setting the reverbs at the right levels. Every mic has a different reverb sent to a different panning side, and this is what the drums sound like when they're all together with the hats, with the toms and everything. Okay, so as I said, I was very happy with that. Now you see here on my mixer, I have my drums bussed out. So the overheads are bussed to 1 bus, which is on bus 33 and 34, and that goes out to bus 43 and 44, which is my main drum bus. And then I have my toms on their bus, the snares on a bus, the kicks on a bus, and the room mics on a bus. So each of these buses can be individually automated if I want the kick, say, higher in one spot or the snare softer in a different spot. So that really helps me as I'm mixing and automating. Enough about drums. Let's move on. Next, to the bass. And as I explained to you, I always build from the bottom up here. So here I'm working on the bass next. Now again with the bass, we got a fantastic sound. This bass was played by a fellow by the name of Bob Bruyere. Bob is our bass player on the Stevie Wonder Hanukkah and plays with us often as well. You could see on this EQ, it looks like a lot, but it actually wasn't all that dramatic. Listen without it. And with. So what I did here was to try and bring out some of the clarity of the bass, and you see here it was about 2K where you could hear the articulation of the strings. That really helped me to get a nice clear bass sound. And here, where's that? At 100 hertz or so, I dipped out a little bit because actually his bass was too bassy. He got a really great sound. He used a universal audio box and used some plugins on the way in. He got a really grungy sound going through a bass amp. So I was very happy with it. So this just needed a little EQ and it was ready to go. Now let's add the bass to the drums. Cool. Now one thing I should mention is if you look at this bass track, you'll notice that it's just one, this is this brown one, it's just one track all the way across. You may be thinking, oh, I could never do that, he's such a good bass player, he could play it in one take. This was not one take, he is such a great bass player, but this is not just one take. He did several takes, and this is comped together and edited together from several takes. I took the best of what he did, because I wanted him to really flow with it. Actually, if you watch the video, you'll see that this was filmed in his house, and you'll see him playing in his own living room. I went to each musician because during COVID it was just safer and made it easier for everybody. So this was filmed at Bob's house and we got an amazing sound. I brought it back to the studio and dropped it right into the session. Awesome, let's move on. All right, next up we got our keys. Love that. Cool, funky. All right, you're listening to the sounds of Alex Clough on keys. Alex is an amazing player, and he's in our video as well. You could check him out there. You could hear that this is a sound for all of you who play keys. This is a Rhodes sound. This is a Rhodes sound, and we chose a basic Rhodes for this. I added a little bit of, let's take a look here. This is a MIDI track that I printed, and here's the Rhodes track right over here. And you could see there's no plugins above, but I did print it with some EQ and compression and just a little bit of reverb, but the main bulk of the sound was the Rhodes. Now I'm going to head over to the piano just to show you the basic chords that he was playing. Let's slide over here. Whoa, that's loud. Let's lower that a little bit. Okay, cool. So this song is really pretty simple, but it takes a good piano player to make it sound cool. So it's just D minor. So we played it in D minor. Stevie Wonder was an E flat minor, but for us it's just D minor, and actually there's usually a seventh in there. D minor 7, you add the C on top, and then G7. So the whole song pretty much is. Now play it down an octave, you get a little heavier. Now I could try and simulate a Rhodes sound here. Let's see what I got here. Rhodes. Oh, Rhodes. There we go. Bell Rhodes. Yeah, up high. All right, cool. You get the idea. So basically, those are the chords of this section, and there's a little change. Always, sometimes, would not get a thing. It changes a little bit, but then it goes back to Hanukkah. We light up the night on Hanukkah. We shining so bright. Yeah, so that's pretty much the whole song. So how do you take a song like that that's so simple? Stevie Wonder, genius at songwriting. It's so simple, and how do you make it cool on the keyboard? Well, Alex showed you how in this performance. Lots of fills and lots of really cool, funky things.
Just grab my menorah, light it up and
just like this. Yeah, so little things like that. He left the chords, and then he came back to it afterwards to kind of complete the phrase. That's really good piano playing. Again, if you look, you'll see that there's just one stereo piano track. This was, again, comped from several takes. I, again, went to Alex's house with my mobile setup, and Alex lives in Westchester also, so we set up the whole rig, and we recorded it, and then comped it together afterwards. Let's move on. Next up, we have guitar. Let's give it a listen. Yeah, so this is that really, really cool, funky guitar line from Stevie's original track. Actually, let me play it for you in the original track just so you could hear it, because it's really cool. Hear it? I'll play it one more time. Can you hear that? So that's a really, really cool guitar line that Udi was able to match in our key. Udi Levy, by the way, an amazing guitarist, an amazing guitar teacher, plays on this video and in our band. He's actually the first member ever to play in our band, except for me. But we have a great rapport going back, 12, 13 years. So this is Udi. Very simple. Simple sound, little amp, clean amp, little reverb. Little finger picking thing here. Okay, cool. Before I show you how that comes together, I forgot to show you what it sounds like when we add the keys to our mix. So I showed you already drums and bass. Let's add the Rhodes into that. Sounding funky. Cool, and now let's add that clean guitar that we were just talking about. So what you could hear here, forgive me, I'm chewing ice. Anyone else like to chew ice? If you do, comment in the comments below, let me know. What you hear here is a mix, and I can't take credit for this, a mix that the instruments are so carefully put together in a way that they're complementing each other. That's all Stevie Wonder, his arrangement. Because a lot of people, when they go to mix something, they think that if you just add more things on top of each other, you end up getting something that's bigger and better. But that could actually be the furthest thing from the truth. oftentimes what you find is if you can find a part that has holes in it and spaces in it, and then you find another part that complements it and fills in those spaces, you end up with something that sounds so interesting and musical, and it keeps your ear going to different places all the time. Here's an example of that. Now I hear the guitar. Now I hear the keys. And then the keys does a fill and I hear that. Drums do a fill. So yeah, as those instruments are playing off each other, they grab my attention, which is really the function of a good mix. Let's move on here. We have one more thing to look at here on the guitar, and that is the guitar solo. This was one of the best guitar solos I think I've ever heard. He's played a lot of great solos, but this one kind of blew my mind. Take a listen. Awesome guitar solo, Udi. Great job. So basically, if you look at this track, again, all I have is a very light compressor on it and a little bit of reverb, but he did run it through a guitar amp. I went to his house in Brooklyn and we tracked that guitar there. Again, this guitar was several takes where we comped together, but if you listen to it with the track, it really, really brings a ton of energy. Check it out. Awesome. So now what we have is we have a full complement of instruments. We have some fills here and there. We have the clean guitar, we have the distorted guitar, we have the Rhodes, the drums, the bass. And what I like to do when I'm mixing is I like to keep all these vocals muted, all this stuff muted while I'm mixing until it's time to do that. So I'll just lay out all the instruments first. And I'll get them all panned the way I like them. I'll get them all the volumes the way I like them. I may even start to automate the volumes a little bit the way I like them. But then the next thing is the horns and the vocal. Here are our horns for this track. Awesome. So you see that these horns were actually doubled. We have 2 high alto saxes and we have 2 lower tenor saxes. And those are doubled. And this was also recorded at Steven's house. Check out Steven Rhodes Chen, amazing saxophone player. This was recorded at his house in Brooklyn. I actually recorded Udi and Steven on the same day. It was a very long day. Recorded Udi first, broke down all the gear, got some lunch, then recorded Steven in the evening. But we got everything. If you check out the video, you'll see that those guys are all playing their instruments. Steven in his own home studio, Udi rocking out in his own home studio. That's one of the ways we were able to keep the video COVID-spaced and safe like that. Well, these saxophones sound really great, and the layering of these saxophones is part of what really gives it awesome sound. If you look at the Sir Duke section, obviously the saxophone is featured here. Awesome, and when you hear that in the mix, I cannot stress enough how important it is to get good sounds on the way in. If you're recording saxophone and there's something stuffed in your saxophone, or actually when I was at Steven's house, he had a light hanging from his ceiling which was vibrating when he played the saxophone. It was like, ooh, and even if it wasn't a note in the chord, it was still vibrating. So all we did was we took like a little throw blanket and we kind of hung it on the thing to reduce those vibrations, and it made the sound a lot better. A lot of people go in and they're in a rush to get a good sound, and so they record quickly and they say, I'll fix it later. It is so much harder to fix it later, and when you do fix it later, it never comes out quite as good as it would have if you had done it in the beginning. Okay, last thing after the saxophone is the vocals. Now this section gave us a lot of trouble. I'll explain to you why. This section right here, it's so weird. It sounds so simple, and if you go back to Stevie for a second, so you see how we pretty much sound just like him except a half step down. But it actually took forever to get it. I don't know why, but I do know what we came up with in the end. So let me take you over to the piano. All right, let's get off of this Rhodes now. Okay, so it's very simple. It's D minor, da, 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 and then right? That's the main one that I hear. And then there's a lower one, da, 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 right? Those are the two outsides. But then this middle one was what I think tripped us up, because you hear da, 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 and you think but it's actually not. So you have, I'm getting confused again. You have right, and then this one. I gotta listen. Even I can't remember. We did so many versions that I can't even remember what we did in the end. So let's listen. So that's the high one that I just played you. It's a funky little note there on the A flat. And then we got this one. Alright, so that's the really weird one. Alright, so that one is the one I played. Again, that funky note there. Those are really what makes it cool. It's the middle voice that tripped us up, because that middle voice was so hard to figure out. Starts on the D. Sounds easy enough, but if it followed the other voices, you would think it would go, right? But it doesn't. And that was really what made it sound wrong. And if you listen back to Stevie, let's roll back over here one more time. You hear do-do-do-do-do. Yeah, do-do-do-do-do, which for him should be an E flat. Do-do-do-do, but we're a half step down in D. Do-do-do-do-do. So that note doesn't change. So if you hear it together, it's actually very different than... And that's really what was giving us so much trouble. In the end, we figured it out, and... yeah, and we ended up with a really, really funky part when you listen to it all together. Okay, that was a long explanation of a very short part of this song. The main part of this song is the lead vocals. You have Chaim Moskowitz, an amazing singer, and you heard him on this track, obviously.
Looking back on when I was a little train of spinning wool. When my only worry was for Hanukkah, what would be my toy?
Cool, there's Chaim. And again, if you look at the vocal bus, it's fairly simple. Let's take a look. We have a Pultec EQ, a little boost at 5K and a little boost at 12K. We have a little compressor that's barely working, and a de-esser, and some reverb. That is our chain for Chaim. Then you get to my vocal. I sang the chorus, Chaim sang the vocals, the verses. So here's mine.
On Hanukkah, we light up the night. On Hanukkah, we...
And this one you could see here, we had again a simple Pultec, a boost at 5K, a boost at 10K in my case. We had a little LA2A compressor and a slight de-esser just to control those sibilants. Some reverb on it. Actually a fair amount of reverb on both of these vocals. A little more on mine, a little less on Chaim's. I guess the chorus is a little thicker, so you need that reverb to kind of cut through a little more. This is what it sounds like together.
So Hanukkah, we light up the night. On Hanukkah, we shining so bright on these 8 days.
Now, a quick moment about singers, just to give you an idea. Singers are very interesting in the studio. They all have very different personalities. One thing about singers is when you play trumpet, if you hit a wrong note, you could always hit the trumpet or clean out the spit valve or something like that. If you play saxophone, you could do the same thing. If you play guitar, you could always get a new pick or something. With singers, when they mess up, it's very personal. So it's very hard to get singers to really be in the zone and in the moment. But you could hear from Chaim's performance here that we were able to get a performance that was just like really energetic and really passionate. And when you watch a video, this was obviously made for the video. When you watch a video, you need that energy. You need that style. You need that vibe. And Chaim really brought it in the studio. So when you're working with singers in the studio, make sure that you're dealing with them as people. You can't just treat singers like a keyboard or a saxophone or a trumpet. You really need to see that they're in the right mind space. You got to get them a drink of water. You got to light a candle, turn out the lights. You got to do what you got to do to get them in the mood. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe turn up all the lights and get them hyped up and get them excited. So depending on the style of song, the singer's got to be in the right mode to get that right performance, because the singing is all about the magic, and that's the loudest thing in the mix anyway. So that's it. That's all we got here. We got our vocals, we went through our horns, our guitars, our keys, our bass, and our drums, and that's the full mix. So once you listen to it all together, here at the end, really start building. Oh, I almost forgot. There's some other vocals here. These are the gang vocals here. Listen to this.
Hanukkah, light up the night. Hanukkah, shining so bright.
Yeah, so those were double. This is us over and over again. We have 2 of the high, 2 of the mid, 2 of the mid-low, and 2 of the low-low. And basically these are all bust out to high, mid, low. And each one of these has its own fader. And each one of these has a slight compressor, EQ. You don't see, I'm not doing anything really all that special here. I'm just doing a little EQ, a little compression, or a little reverb. It's all about getting the good sounds going in. I can't stress that enough. And then on our background vocal bus, we have a little compressor just to pull it all together and a little de-esser just to control those sibilants. And then we have some reverb. I'll play it for you without the reverb just so you could hear what the recording's like.
Hanukkah, light up the night. Hanukkah, shining so bright.
And with the reverb.
Hanukkah, light up the night. Hanukkah, shining so bright.
Now you may think that that sounds like too much reverb, and I'd say that you're right. But when you listen to the mix,
New Gary, light up the night. Hanukkah, shine so bright.
the background vocals are so far back that they need some of that reverb to kind of complete the sound and mix it in with the thing. If they're too dry, they end up sticking out, and you don't want them to stick out because you want them to blend into the full band. So that's the mix. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would mention. You know, I'm sure there's a lot more things that I could say about it. I'm sure there's a lot more questions you could ask about it, but that's how I put it together, and we're really pretty proud of it, really excited about it. We hope you enjoyed watching it. Obviously, there's a whole nother process when it comes to the video itself and when it comes to putting together the video and all the different clips and the locations and all of that, but that's for a different video. This is all about the audio of breaking down the mix in Pro Tools, and I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Breaking Down the Mix. So thanks so much for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe below and make sure that you comment. Let us know what mix you'd like to hear us break down next. Thank God we've done hundreds of mixes here in the studio, from our own recordings to other people's recordings that have come into the studio to record here. And we're happy to show you how to break down any of them. So if you comment below and we get a bunch of comments, hey, could you break down, Salam, or could you break down, whatever other dreidel, we love dreidel, or Hanukkah, or whatever it is that you want to hear. We're happy to go into those sessions and show you how it's done. So that should be it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Lights on.